Coming up on Network Africa, fresh fighting reported in South Sudan as a fragile peace agreement breaks down. Two brothers charged with 3 counts related to terrorism appear in court in South Africa. And the social media ban in Ethiopia after answers to a university entrance exam is leaked online. Network Africa starts right now. Hello and welcome to Network Africa. I am Adeshewa Josh. We have a lot today, but let's begin by reviewing the major stories that made headlines over the weekend.
At least 272 people have died in fighting between South Sudan's rival factions in the capital Juba, including 33 civilians, as heavy gunfire erupted again in the city and many residents sought shelter at the UN base. The fighting first broke out on Thursday and Friday between troops loyal to President Salva Kiir and soldiers who support Vice President Riek Machar. The violence raises fears South Sudan could slide back into conflict after emerging from a 2-year-old civil war which began in December 2013 after Kiir sacked Machar as Vice President. Neighboring Kenya called for urgent action by the two leaders to move troops away from civilians and end the crisis. Elsewhere, Zambia's Electoral Commission has suspended campaigning in 2 areas, including the capital Lusaka, due to escalating political violence before the August 11 elections. In a statement by the Zambian police chief, Kakuma Kanganja, says police in Lusaka on Friday shot dead 1 opposition supporter in a group that took to the streets, harassing motorists and attacking police after the political party was denied permission to hold a rally. The Electoral Commission of Zambia said it was suspending campaigns in Lusaka and Namwala, south of the capital, for 10 days until July the 18th, when the situation would be reviewed. Finally, to the west of Africa, Nigeria's state oil company urged motorists not to engage in panic petrol buying, a day after a trade union representing oil workers began a strike that raised fears of future fuel shortages. Petrol shortages caused lengthy queues for motorists seeking to fill their tanks earlier this year, after fuel importers struggled to find dollars needed to pay for refined oil products due to foreign exchange restrictions imposed by the central bank. The Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Association of Nigeria on Thursday last week said 10,000 of its members, which includes refinery workers and office staff, have begun industrial action over issues critical to the survival of the country's energy sector.
Welcome back, everyone. We're getting reports of fresh violence in South Sudan, especially in the capital, Juba, and near the UN headquarters in Jebel. The fighting has been ongoing since last week, leaving more than 200 people dead. The latest came hours after the UN Security Council called on the warring factions to immediately stop the fighting. The Council condemned the violence in the strongest terms and expressed particular shock and outrage at attacks on UN sites. It has also called for additional peacekeepers to be sent to the country. Well, there has been some casualty on the part of the peacekeepers, with China saying 2 of its peacekeepers have been killed in Juba. Several other peacekeepers from other nations have been injured in that attack. And we're still trying to figure out what exactly is going on in South Sudan and why the recent violence in the capital, Juba. The latest round of violence, we understand, erupted when troops loyal to President Salva Kiir and First Vice President Riek Machar began shooting at each other in the streets of the capital. If the reports we are receiving is anything to go by, it kind of seems a disagreement at a checkpoint between rival soldiers led to the shootout, which quickly escalated into serious fighting. Tensions have, however, been high since April, when Mr. Machar returned to the capital following a peace deal. There are concerns now that there could be a repeat of the civil war that began in 2013. It started much the same way, with clashes between rival soldiers in Juba, which degenerated into a nationwide ethnic conflict, leading to the death of thousands of people and millions more homeless, and many other becoming refugees. As far as we know, both leaders, that's President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, have called for calm. Meanwhile, this weekend in South Sudan would have been 5th anniversary marking that referendum that led to its independence from Sudan. But there were no celebrations because of the fighting, as thousands have continued to flee fighting from civil war and from fresh violence. Now, aid workers overseeing their welfare at a camp in Kakuma, Kenya, are worried that there is not enough food to go around and malnutrition is on the rise.
Kaleta Oberi was born the same year as her country, South Sudan. Now 5 years old, she's severely malnourished, fragile, and trying to regain her strength. Like many others, Kaleta's mother, Cecilia, decided the family had to leave in order to survive.
There is a serious drought in South Sudan. There is no rain. There is a lot of hunger. We also have a lot of insecurity. We came here by lorry, where we ran into some rebels on the way, and they started shooting at us.
They came to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where Kaleta received care by doctors and nurses at an emergency feeding center. The camp is home to nearly 200,000 refugees, the majority of which are South Sudanese and are in urgent need of assistance. Despite a peace agreement signed last year to end a civil war, people continue to flee violence and malnutrition.
I've also observed that among the children, there are very malnourished children.
Usual, I have to also report that the humanitarian response is sorely lacking due to severe underfunding. We have 42 non-governmental partners with UNHCR, and we're requesting $573 million for refugee protection and assistance programs, and the interagency appeal is funded at 17%. So basically, this means, as a result of this lack of funding, water, sanitation, hygiene, health, shelter interventions in most of the countries or asylum are below the global standard. And there are risks of outbreak of diseases.
The United Nations Refugee Agency and its partners have been providing food and life-saving medical care, but every day more sick children arrive. Like thousands others, Cecilia is waiting for peace and security to take hold in South Sudan. The new nation held much promise, but for now, that promise remains distant.
Let's get the latest on the South Sudan crisis. VOA's Jason Pantakin has been monitoring closely the situation in that country. He joins me from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Remember, some South Sudanese are taking refuge at a camp in that country. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What more do we know about the fresh violence that has erupted in South Sudan? What really caused it?
Well, it's hard to say what really caused it. Both sides have blamed each other. The city of Juba was ready to go. There was a lot of tension between the two sides that had built for months as the peace deal was not well implemented. The two sides were supposed to be working together to provide security, but this simply didn't happen. That tension finally exploded into violence in a big way on Friday. On Thursday night, there had been a small skirmish where 5 government soldiers were killed. Then on Friday, there was heavy fighting. Hundreds were killed. It seems like the opposition suffered the most casualties in that instance. Saturday was calm, and then it started again Sunday and has continued today. It is hard to say who has the upper hand in the city. But the government certainly has more firepower and more manpower than the rebels, who are limited to 2 small areas. So it is a very
All right, Jason.
difficult and dangerous situation.
That's right. Jason, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. Let's take a quick break on Network Africa. When we come back, we'll go back to Jason and also look at stories from South Africa. National broadcaster ordered to lift a ban on coverage of protests in the country in just a moment.